Hello everyone, it's Moviescope here again. Today, I'll be reviewing the film Emancipation. This is a true story from the history of the liberation of black people in America. When Abraham Lincoln won the 1860 election on a platform of preventing the expansion of slavery, the governments of the southern states, wanting to maintain a balance with the slave states and their newfound wealth from cotton, saw 11 states secede to form the Confederacy. Not long after, war began when Confederate forces attacked the U.S. Army's Fort Sumter, marking the start of the bloodiest Civil War in American history. This black man realizes the person behind him is about to kill him. Just as the other man draws his gun, he seizes the moment, using his shovel to fling sand and rocks into the overseer's face, then turns and uses the shovel to strike down the other man. After taking down the two of them, he grabs the knife from the white man's belt and quickly flees into the forest. Seeing this, the other black men also scatter and run. The entire camp erupts into chaos. The enraged commander immediately raises his rifle and starts shooting at the fleeing slaves. In a storm of bullets, most of the slaves are gunned down. Only 4 manage to escape successfully. But ahead of them lies a swamp full of alligators, and behind them, ruthless slave hunters. To escape this place is a matter of 9 parts death and 1 part life. The men chasing them are even more terrifying than the hungry alligators. Just a few months earlier, Peter was at home, surrounded by his wife and children. Suddenly, a few white men burst in and forcibly took him away to work on the railroad. Peter fought back desperately. The 3 men couldn't restrain him, because Peter knew that if he were taken to work as a slave on the railroad, he would likely be worked to death. This farewell could be forever, but resistance was futile, as the slave catchers would use his family's lives to threaten him. For his wife and children, Peter had to accept his fate. The white man, smarting from the fight, struck Peter on the head with the butt of his rifle, knocking him unconscious. They then threw him into a cage with several other men. The slave master showed not a shred of sympathy for his family, because in those days, the lives of black slaves were worth next to nothing. In his heart, Peter vowed that he must escape, that he must reunite with his family. But escaping wasn't something you could just talk about. The closer they got to the concentration camp, the more bodies of escapees were piled up on both sides of the road. Along the way, many heads were impaled on stakes as a warning from the white men. This was the fate of runaway slaves. On his first day in the camp, Peter witnessed slaves being tortured. If anyone disobeyed an order, they would be shot on the spot. A moment's hesitation meant a brutal beating. The guards here operated without reason because they believed they were the reason. Seeing a man being savagely beaten, Peter stepped forward to intervene. This act enraged the guards. An old, bearded man was about to shoot him dead. "Do you know who I am?" "So who are you, then?" "Oh, I'm asking you. Why are you asking me back, you dog?" Fortunately, at that moment, a slave hunter returned, and the tense situation eased slightly. However, he marked Peter, waiting for an opportunity to deal with him. The slave who had failed to escape was held down over a tree stump. The slave hunter then took a red-hot iron rod and branded a permanent scar onto his face. Here, a slave's life was worth less than an animal's. By day, they had to work like machines. By night, they were chained up like dogs. Running away meant being tormented to a point where life was worse than death. If you didn't run, you lived with exploitation and savage beatings. The end result here was either being killed or being worked to death. Peter wanted to escape, but he kept it to himself, silently waiting for a chance to break out of this hell on earth. But nothing escaped the notice of the slave hunter facile. "I am your God, because you are alive on this earth because I allow you to live. Now, you are my dog." To completely crush Peter's idea of escape, he tied Peter up and let the hunting dogs memorize his scent. His friends, witnessing this, all shook their heads, thinking he wouldn't survive the day. However, contrary to what they thought, he not only survived, but his eyes grew colder and more determined. It's true, what doesn't kill you only makes you stronger. Until one day, Peter overheard a conversation between 2 white guards. Lincoln in the North had signed the Emancipation Proclamation. Black people were starting to fight back. Slaves from all over were fleeing to Baton Rouge. This gave Peter a glimmer of hope. He decided to risk it all. So, during a meal, he told the others about his plan. They just needed to cross the swamp ahead and travel another 40 miles, 64 kilometers, to reach Lincoln's base. Now, they needed to wait for the right moment. The next day, the opportunity arrived. A slave collapsed from overwork. Fessel ordered Peter to dispose of the body. He dragged the corpse to the mass grave. The guard behind him, who had long held a grudge against Peter, wanted to use this opportunity to eliminate him. But Peter had seen through their suspicious actions. In a critical moment, Peter used a shovel as a weapon to fight back. then turned and struck down the other guard. "That's it, I've had enough of you." He furiously sent the 2 guards to meet their maker. See, karma doesn't spare anyone. Then he grabbed a dagger and ran into the forest. The surrounding slaves saw this and followed suit. This action alerted the slave hunters, but the commander, Fassel, was not surprised. He was used to this. The first thing he did was shoot the leaders of the escape, giving them no chance of survival, to make an example of them and deter other slaves from planning future escapes. He released his 3 hunting dogs and led his men in pursuit. He was the best slave hunter here. No slave had ever escaped his grasp. The 4 men ran frantically. They needed to cross a swamp to reach Lincoln's Liberation Army, but none of them knew the way to the swamp. They could only judge the direction by the sound of Lincoln's cannons. In any case, 2 legs couldn't outrun 4. The slave hunters' dogs had memorized each slave's scent and quickly caught up. The 4 men reached a swamp and waded in without hesitation, but one man stopped because he saw an alligator in the water. In the few seconds he hesitated, a hunting dog pounced on him. The others couldn't turn back to save their poor comrade. Survival was the most important thing now. The hunters quickly arrived and pulled the slave, who was about to be mauled to death, away from the dog. "You tell me where your friends went and I'll let you go. You're not worth us chasing down." The man, believing him, revealed where Peter was heading. Fassel kept his promise and let him go, but forgot to mention it was to the next world. A second later, the alligators, smelling blood, swarmed in. They hungrily tore the man to pieces to feast on. Elsewhere, to make their escape easier, the 3 decided to split up to create a diversion. If one was unfortunately caught, the other 2 would still have a chance. Peter found a house in the woods. He hid behind a woodpile, drank water frantically, and then borrowed a bedsheet and a potato from the slave owner's house. Unexpectedly, the owner's daughter spotted him and rang the alarm bell. The little girl had been taught to see slaves as animals, her face cold and without a hint of remorse. Soon, the bell attracted the hunters, who followed the trail of blood. Peter bandaged his wound simply and continued to flee deeper into the swamp. Seeing the hunters getting closer, he stuffed the bloody cloth into a log to create a decoy, then jumped into the swamp to hide, using the foul swamp water to mask his body odor. The trick worked on the dogs, but Fassel, not letting his guard down, stared intently at the swamp. Only when he saw an alligator surface did he turn and leave. By then, Peter was deep underwater. After the hunters were gone, Peter slowly crawled ashore. Unexpectedly, an alligator attacked him from behind, dragging him into the water. In a critical moment, Peter managed to kick the alligator away, grab a piece of wood to block its sharp teeth, and push it away. He quickly drew his dagger and stabbed it in the head. The alligator, struck by the knife, seemed to scream, "Hey, I was just kidding. Why so serious?" until it stopped moving. Only then did he dare climb ashore. After this little joke, the alligator switched to the backstroke, a style said to be trending as it tried to join its ancestors in the great beyond. Gritting his teeth against the pain, he pulled out the alligator's teeth one by one. After a short rest, Peter continued on his way. To mask his scent, he smeared himself with manure and mud. With this high-level move, he was second only to Zhuge Liang, lacking only the feather fan. If the slave hunters knew about this, they would probably kneel and call him Grandpa. Meanwhile, Fassel, not giving up, circled back to the swamp. He saw the alligator's corpse floating on the water. Fassel cautiously ordered his subordinate to cut open the alligator's stomach, but it was completely empty. They couldn't believe a slave could kill an alligator with his bare hands. This made him even more wary of this runaway slave. So that night, they had grilled alligator and a new skin for a Hermes bag. One of his men thought it wasn't worth so much effort for one slave, but Fassel was incredibly stubborn. If Peter escaped, he would surely return leading an entire army. The next day, Peter discovered a hunter's cabin in the forest. While the owner was away, he took the opportunity to replenish his energy, placing a heated knife on his wound to stop the bleeding. However, staying here long wasn't a good idea. Peter saw a beehive full of honey on a nearby tree. He climbed to the tall tree to get some honey to eat to disinfect his wound. A master of seizing opportunities, he also borrowed the hunter's small boat to complete his set. But he accidentally ran into Mrs. Snake and their 4 eyes met, foaming at the mouth. Not wasting words, the young man swatted the snake aside and stole the boat. With a full stomach, he continued his escape. Back at his home, his wife had been sold to another owner by the slave master. She was separated from her 3 children, and the evil overseer had his eyes on her eldest daughter. Though filled with rage, the mother could do nothing. People like them were treated like pets in the hands of slave owners, to be sold or given away at will. Elsewhere, Peter had rowed a considerable distance, but when he looked back, he saw birds scattering from the forest. He was sure the slave hunters were still searching for him. And just as he feared, not long after Peter left the boat, Fassel found the spot. Peter picked an onion, turned around, and ran into Andre, one of the men who had escaped with him. "You led the dogs to me. I didn't do anything," Peter said to Andre, explaining that rubbing onion all over his body could mask the scent. But Andre didn't believe in such nonsense and found his own hiding place. Before long, the hunting dogs ran up and started barking under a tree. Fassel looked up, and sure enough, there was a slave in the tree. Andre declared that he was not their slave or their animal, but a free man. A gunshot rang out and Andre fell to the ground. Although Peter had inadvertently led to his death, Andre never revealed Peter's whereabouts. In a fit of rage, Fassel cut off Andre's head. He didn't know that Peter was hiding in a nearby hollow tree. After Fassel left, Peter slowly emerged. Seeing his comrade's tragic death, he became even more determined to escape. That night, a bright light shone ahead. He saw a large building engulfed in flames, with bodies littering the ground. It seemed there had been an uprising against the landowner here. Peter cautiously entered to observe. Before he could assess the situation, he wolfed down the food on the table. He had been starving for so long. Suddenly, the sound of a piano echoed. Peter followed the sound and found a young black girl, barely breathing. He quickly carried her outside, preparing to get her some water. The girl stopped him and took the necklace from her neck to give to Peter. Just then, a slave hunter arrived. He ordered Peter to drop his knife. Peter begged him to save the girl, saying he would do anything. "You can do whatever you want to me, handsome, but this girl needs medical help now." But the man didn't care about the life of a black person. In the end, the girl died in despair. Peter, boiling with rage, secretly gripped the crucifix in his hand. When the man wasn't looking, he turned and dealt with him. At that moment, another one arrived. Peter immediately picked up the gun and shot him dead. He didn't forget to insult him. "You are the lowest of the low," before finishing the vicious man off with the butt of the rifle. Then he continued his escape. Fassel, hearing the gunshots, also pursued. Seeing how useless his underlings were, he finished them off himself. The hunting dogs also caught Peter's scent, but by now, Peter was no longer afraid. He stood firm, waiting for the dog to charge, and then shot it dead. And so, Peter ran through the fields all night. Following the sound of the cannons, he finally found Lincoln's base. He collapsed to the ground, exhausted, wanting to drink some water, but there wasn't a drop around. Just then, the cannon fire grew closer. He knew he was very close to freedom. Hope was right in front of him. Unexpectedly, Fassel was right on his tail. A crack of the whip sent Peter tumbling to the ground. After chasing Peter for so long, Fassel didn't just want to kill him. He wanted to declare his status as master over this slave, to make Peter submit to him like a dog. But Peter would rather die than submit, kneeling on the ground awaiting death. A gunshot split the sky. Unexpectedly, the one who fell was Fassel. It turned out that Lincoln's soldiers passing by had saved Peter. Before he died, Peter said, "You are not my God, you bastard." A moment later, Captain K.U. of the 1st Louisiana Native Guard arrived to rescue Peter. They not only gave him water, but also took him back to their base to recover. After some time and treatment, he fully recovered. One day, Peter went to the base commander. The commander gave him two choices. 1. Go to a plantation to pick cotton, continuing to be a slave for white men. 2. Join the Liberation Army to save slaves from oppression once and for all. Peter, without hesitation, chose to join the army because he had to save his family. As he walked out of the barracks, he happened to meet his friend who had escaped with him. He was in just as pitiful a state as Peter, but just by making it here they had already escaped a death sentence by 50%. Later, 2 war correspondents found Peter. With his permission, they took a photograph that would shock the world. This photo later became irrefutable evidence of the barbaric slave system and inspired many black slaves to join the Revolutionary Army. A few days later, the commander learned that Peter had escaped from a Confederate base. He knew they had a new type of gun but had no idea of its size or function. Peter revealed that he had built railroads for them, so he knew everything about their base and weapon placements. The new gun the commander mentioned was a massive cannon. After getting the enemy's situation, the commander of the Liberation Army immediately organized an attack on this stronghold. Although they weren't professionally trained, with their passion and determination to win back their freedom, they charged into the enemy's position without fear of the storm of bullets and bombs. Cannons exploded everywhere, but no one backed down because they were fighting for freedom. On the other side, with thorough preparation, the Confederate Army, consisting of 11 seceded states, had built impregnable fortresses with their newfound wealth from cotton. Their giant cannons roared continuously on the battlefield. However, what they faced was the Liberation Army, mostly made up of slaves they had oppressed. These men knew no fear of death. In their eyes was a grim determination to seek revenge and reclaim their freedom. After 6 days of bloody battle, they finally captured this land. However, the army also suffered heavy losses. A few months later, the army advanced south, attacking Louisiana directly. The region's largest slave owner was shot dead on the spot. All his family's assets were confiscated, ending the cruel reign of the Confederate slave masters. When the black commander announced they were free, the slaves stood motionless, unable to believe it. It took a long moment for them to react. In that moment, they cried tears of joy. The light of freedom shone through the thick canopy of trees onto them. Peter also saw his family in the crowd. This film not only makes the audience reflect on history, but also recreates the meaning of freedom. Whether surviving or dying, every soul that does not yield to oppression is pursuing a true faith. And true faith is not just empty words, but the freedom that tens of thousands have sacrificed to win. The movie ends here. When the war ended in 1865 with a victory for the Union, 38,000 black soldiers had lost their lives out of a total of 620,000 deaths on both sides. Although they won freedom from the yoke of slavery, black people still had to fight for many more years against racial discrimination. The title of the film says it all. The main character, like all black slaves of that era, had to walk his own journey to find freedom for himself and his family. Freedom didn't just appear suddenly, nor was it granted by someone else. It was a long journey paid for with their own blood and tears. Therefore, the youth of today, who enjoy material comforts, must strive to study and develop, because our ancestors also made such sacrifices to secure the freedom that allows their descendants to study in peace today. Thank you very much for supporting MovieScope, which has allowed the channel to grow to where it is today. If you enjoyed this, please give me a like and a comment with your thoughts on the film. And especially, please subscribe to the channel to follow my latest movie summaries. See you again, my dear friends.